There's a moment many trauma survivors eventually reach when they realize, I understand my story intellectually, but my body still does not feel safe. And that realization can be deeply discouraging because many intelligent, insightful people spend years reading books, going to therapy, maybe even understanding attachment patterns and identifying behavioral patterns in their life, and even learning coping strategies. Yet, their nervous system still reacts as though the danger is near and imminent. Their body still braces, still scans, still overreacts, still collapses, still disconnects. And that question became one of the driving forces behind my upcoming book, The Trauma Recovery Blueprint. In this book, I introduce a framework I've been developing over years of clinical work called the Relational Nervous System Integration Model. And my goal is not to replace existing trauma models, but to help integrate several of the most important advances in trauma treatment into a more cohesive understanding of how trauma actually reshapes the human nervous system through relationship. Because one of the things I increasingly observed in my clinical work was that many trauma survivors were not merely carrying painful memories, they were carrying an altered nervous system, kind of prediction system, altered relational expectations, altered physiological states, and even identity structures, like who am I? Their entire system had adapted around survival. And insight alone isn't enough to reorganize those deeper adaptations. So one of the challenges in modern trauma treatment is that we now have several profoundly important models, but many clinicians and survivors still struggle to understand how they fit together. For example, Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory helped us understand the nervous system states underlying trauma responses. And Richard Schwartz's internal family systems helped illuminate the protective parts that emerge to help people survive overwhelming experiences. And then Francine Shapiro's adaptive information processing model of EMDR helps to explain how unprocessed experiences remain dysfunctionally stored and continue influencing present experience. Each of these models has contributed something extraordinarily valuable, but many clinicians still feel, how do these pieces fit together? How do they fully integrate? And many survivors feel, why do I understand all of this, but I still feel trapped inside my nervous system? These questions matter deeply, and the relational nervous system integration model attempts to build a bridge across these domains. At its core, the model proposes that trauma is not simply, a bad memory, of course. It's not simply an emotional wound, and it isn't even just simply a dysregulated nervous system state or fragmented protective parts. Trauma is relationally encoded nervous system adaptation. In other words, the nervous system learns survival through relationship, and therefore many trauma responses are not random dysfunctions, they're organized adaptations around safety, attachment, emotional prediction, relational expectation, and physiological survival. And this is where I believe integration of those systems becomes so very important. For example, polyvagal theory beautifully explains nervous system states, but many people still need a deeper explanation for why specific relational environments organize those states over time. And internal family systems helps explain protective structures inside the psyche, but I believe many parts are also deeply linked to procedural nervous system learning and physiological survival adaptations. And EMDR's adaptive information processing model helps to explain how experiences remain dysfunctionally stored in the nervous system. But many trauma survivors are also carrying ongoing relational conditioning that continually reinforces those neural predictions. And so the relational nervous system integration model attempts to hold those realities together simultaneously, not as competing theories, but as different lenses examining interconnected dimensions of human adaptation. One of the central ideas in the book is this, that trauma changes prediction. The nervous system begins anticipating danger, rejection, shame, abandonment, emotional overwhelm, and betrayal, and eventually those predictions become embodied, not merely believed intellectually, but encoded physiologically. And that's why trauma survivors often say, I know I'm safe, but I still don't feel safe, because healing isn't merely cognitive. Healing requires integration across the nervous system state, relational experience, emotional processing, identity, who I believe I am, plus body physiology, plus attachment schemas, plus procedural learning. And I believe trauma treatment is moving increasingly towards this kind of integrative understanding. So my hope for the trauma recovery blueprint is that it will serve both clinicians that want to bring the best to their clients and patients and trauma survivors by helping it create a more integrated map of trauma and healing, a map that honors neuroscience and honors attachment and physiology and emotional experience, and the profound role of relationship in shaping the nervous system. Because healing, of course, it's not about becoming emotionless. It's not about pretending the past never happened. That's not healthy. It's about helping the nervous system gradually learn safety, connection, coherence, and integration. If this resonates with you, I encourage you to follow this channel. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be sharing more ideas from the book, more discussions around trauma integration, nervous system healing, and the relational nervous system integration model. Make sure you're following so that you don't miss those announcements. And as always, thank you for being here.